All right. So, 6 months ago, maybe? Yeah, 6 months ago, I did a talk at John Harris's yearly conference, which is totally awesome. And if you live anywhere near upstate New York, like within a 3 mile or 3 hour radius, you should come to this conference. It's like there's a lot of free time for hiking, fishing, hanging out, but then there's also some really cool sessions as well. Plus, you get to meet John Harris. And whether or not I'll be speaking there this year, I don't know yet. He hasn't asked me. I'm going to attend either way because it's that awesome. Anyway, that being said, I gave a talk about internet derangement syndrome, which is a term that I coined to describe how not to be when you're on the internet. But that being said, it applies to life as well. And I think one of the key symptoms of internet derangement syndrome is something that is this is common with people just in general. This is kind of how people are. So everyone does this to some degree. But for some reason, and pastors, I'm going to give you some advice here. You didn't ask, so listen if you want. If you don't care, whatever. But this is something that I think pastors in particular are susceptible to. And I think I know why. It's actually not a bad reason why you're susceptible to this, but you need to really keep this in mind as you go about your daily tasks and as you go about teaching the Bible, because obviously teaching the Bible is very important. So you got to watch out for this. This is a serious problem with all people. Hear me saying this, pastors, but for some reason I feel like pastors are especially susceptible to this. And really, any Christian who goes out there kind of talking about Christianity, I think is very susceptible to this. So that being said, it's this weird thing that happens that you kind of feel sort of threatened, but sort of like shocked when people aren't doing and thinking and acting in the same areas that you are. And this happens on the internet all the time. You know, one time I posted a video of one of my kids playing Little League, and he had been struggling with hitting, and I took a video of him, and I was giving him some advice on how to hit and stuff like that. And he got this solid hit off a kid pitcher who was pretty good, and it was just a really encouraging thing. You know, you work on something long enough, you succeed. I was very satisfied as his father to see him struggle, but then ultimately succeed. That's like a very encouraging thing. I just put it out there on the internet. And it just so happened it was at the time when the fires, I think, in Maui were happening. I think it was Maui. And I got some comments that like, oh, yeah, sure, AD, this is what we need to be worried about instead of what's going on in Maui. And, it was very obvious that this is how the internet is. You understand that this is how the internet is. It's very obvious to me that the person who thought that I was trying, and he also accused me of trying to distract, like I was some kind of distraction psyop by posting a picture of my kid hitting in Little League at a serious time when Maui was on fire. What's happening there is that this guy is like so into this thing in Maui, and I have no idea what was going on in Maui. In fact, I didn't even know at the time, and I still don't. But he was very interested in it, and I'm not saying that's wrong. You know, if you're very interested in what's going on in Maui, because you think it's some kind of a thing, whatever. I'm not against that. You know, I love conspiracy theories too. But he was so into it that anyone who was not as into it as he was suspect, was suspicious, was a distraction psyop, whatever. And you get this kind of thing on the internet all the time. And so you got to watch out for that because, not everybody is always going to be as focused on the things that you're focused on. And it doesn't mean that they're like lying to you. It doesn't mean that they're trying to hide something. It doesn't mean that they're wrong. It just means that they've got other interests. You know what I mean? I did not care what was going on in Maui. I was playing Little League with my kid. That's what I cared about. You know what I mean? And so you got to watch out for this because this is something I think that's common to the human condition, that we think that we kind of get offended almost that someone's not as jazzed about something as we are. You know what I mean? And if I like, I'm into some weird stuff. So like, if I was upset with you because you weren't that interested in the latest, Star Wars trading card game, and I loved playing it with my kids, which I don't know why I would say that, but I mean, it's definitely not real, definitely not true. It doesn't mean that thing is wrong, or that person is trying to distract you, or that person is stupid or something like that. It just doesn't mean that. Pastors, you really need to watch out for this, because this is very, very common with pastors. Now, whenever I criticize pastors, I always feel like I have to say, I love pastors. I recognize your job is very difficult. I respect pastors. In fact, I respect and submit to my pastors, even though there are some things that we disagree with, and stuff like that. I don't seek to undermine them in any way. Like I love pastors, okay? So here, A.D. Robles here is saying, I love pastors. Even the ones I don't really think are that great, I still love them, okay? There you go. But pastors are susceptible to this syndrome, and it's very, very damaging, because here's the thing. The life of the pastor is so devoted to the things of God. And that is an important thing. It's a very important thing. In fact, some might argue it's among the most important things, or maybe even the most important thing. Honoring God, understanding God, knowing what he's like, these are important things. They're important matters. This is what life is all about, understanding God and enjoying God and all of this stuff. It's focused on the big things, right? Not so much the minutia, although there is some minutia there, but it's focused on the big overarching questions that everybody's asking, that everybody has something to do with. Like, this is why I think that they're most susceptible to it, because their job is an especially important job. But it is a narrow job. You don't expect your pastor to be an expert on medicine. You don't expect your pastor to be an expert on plumbing. You don't expect your pastor to be a vaccine scientist. But you do expect them to understand God and to be able to teach about God and to be able to give you counsel on ethical questions and things like that. You expect your pastor to do that, but it's a very narrow lane. And so there are lots of things that also matter that do not fall into that narrow lane. It doesn't mean that it doesn't touch that lane and that lane doesn't have anything to say about it, but they are focused on reading the scriptures, understanding them, teaching them, praying, and doing that job. It's a very narrow lane. There are so many other things that are extremely important that is not that lane. You understand what I'm trying to say? And so because that lane is so important, though, they feel sometimes, and they teach sometimes, that really is the only thing we should be concerned with. This happens all the time. So just like the crazy person on the internet told me that I was distracting from the fires in Maui and the very serious situation that was happening in Maui by taking my kid to Little League and celebrating in joy with his successes in Little League, just like he thought I was distracting from what truly matters, oftentimes pastors will basically say anything distracts from the mission of the gospel, which is what they are uniquely focused on. Anything and everything is a distraction from what really matters, and what really matters is preaching the gospel and praying and that kind of stuff, and reading the Bible and stuff like that. And what's so hard to deal with this is that those things really do matter, and they are really important. But it is not the only tasks that we have. We have good works. God saved us to accomplish good works, and these good works are in all kinds of areas that also matter. So pastors, you need to guard yourself against this temptation to think that everything has to be focused on the same lane that you are exclusively and uniquely focused on. And it's very important. You are correct to think that, and you are correct to act like that. However, it is not the only work that needs to be done. It is not the only important work that needs to be done. It is very important. Hear me saying that again. But Not everyone is in the lane that you are in. And so other people are going to focus a significant amount of time on other things. And that is okay. That is not a sin. Sometimes they act as if it's a sin almost to have other interests and other focus and other tasks that are set before you. And that is so poisonous to your people, because your people are not pastors, and it is not correct to treat them and to expect them to act like pastors. This is an important video. I sure hope you're listening to this, because this is so discouraging to your flock when you say that their life should look a lot like yours in the lane that you're in. Sure, from a moral and ethical perspective, it should. Follow me as I follow Christ. But their tasks, their good works, are very often very different than your tasks and your good works that you are uniquely and exclusively focused on. And I shouldn't say exclusively, because you have other things to do too. Here's how this kind of thing operates in real time. This is Mark Dooley. Mark Dooley is the president of the ERD and the editor of Prov Magazine and a convener at New Wigs and a collator at Methodist View, and he's an author. This is a teacher kind of guy, right? And he says this about Stephen Wolf's book, The Case for Christian Nationalism. He says, a search of Stephen Wolf's A Case of Christian Nationalism finds one mention of evangelism, and then only in passing. Wouldn't Christianizing a nation prioritize reaching new people with the good news? Or is it chiefly gaining political power for the, quote, right people? This is a common criticism of Stephen Wolf's book. So I'm not just trying to pick one that's stupid to refute it. This is very common. Lots of people think this about Stephen Wolf's book. And here's the thing. This is really not complicated. Stephen Wolf's book is a book about political theory. It's about political theory. It is not about evangelism. It is about political theory. It is not about evangelism. It is okay for someone to write a book about one topic and exclude other topics. It is okay for someone to not have to reinvent the wheel and say, look, I'm assuming all of this, and now here's my book because this is what my book is about. I'm assuming the Reformed faith. That's what he says. And this is something he got criticized for again and again and again. Here's the thing, guys. Everyone's book is about what the author wants it to be about. It is okay to write a book about political theory and not evangelism. It is okay for an author to write a book about political theory and not the Reformed faith in general or in toto. That is okay. We have to understand this person's perspective is essentially, look, this is the lane that he should have written in. He should have written in this lane. And since he didn't, it's not correct. It's suspicious. It's wrong. It's potentially even a sin. It's false teaching. And it's like, that's not how it works. This is extremely deranged. This is an extreme version of exactly what I've been explaining. This is the same spirit as the guy who thought I was distracting from the real situation in Maui by posting pictures of my kid playing Little League. Not everyone has to write the book that you would wish would be written. It's a book about political theory. It is not a book about evangelism. He decided what the book would be about. And so therefore, if you want to write a book about how to Christianize the nations through evangelism, because I'm sure we don't have enough of those books, go ahead and write it. Go ahead and write that book again. That's okay. But you see, Stephen said, look, we need some more specific stuff. We need a more narrow focus in a book. And so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to assume the Reformed faith, which understands that evangelism is how a heart of stone turns into a heart of flesh, the power of the gospel. I'm going to assume all that, and then building on that framework, I'm going to write a book about political theory. And for some reason, people lose their minds. They lose their minds over that. And that is deranged. That is very deranged. It's not wrong to write a book about. I'm kind of joking that we have enough books about evangelism. I'm kind of joking about that, but I'm kind of serious because there's plenty of books out there. And by the way, that's probably why Stephen wrote this book, because there are categories of books in the Christian, genre, and like one of the categories has this dearth of books, and one of the categories is just like chock full of books, and he's like, well, here's why we need this book at this particular time. And I appreciate that, because a lot of authors, especially the Big Eva sort of conference circuit types, they don't consider that. It's like, do I really need to write this book about the gospel, of so-and-so? Or has this book been written 30 times in the last year, and I'm just going to write it again, with a few different examples and anecdotes? I wish more people would consider this. So we got so many books that talk about this exact thing. Do we really need another one right now? If you want to write another one, I'm not against that. That's an important topic. But I would appreciate more books that are different in some way, that are not a different gospel, but focused on a different thing. Because this is the thing, like the kind of books we get in from the Big Eva conference circle are essentially, the kind of thing that we got from Sunday school, where it's like your teacher asks you, what's the solution to X, and you answer Jesus, and she's like, that's great, class, that's wonderful. And it's like, well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, Jesus is the answer. But what I found when I was an adult, I came to faith. What I found when I was an adult was like, okay, that's wonderful. Jesus is the answer. So now what? What do I do? What do you mean that Jesus is the answer? How does that apply to my everyday dealings? What do I do? And I found very little in terms of that kind of application. And so we need more of that, in my opinion. We need a lot more of that, in my opinion. And so pastors, don't be like this. Don't be deranged. Don't be deranged like this. In fact, this guy responded to me. I said, some people become so deranged about their particular lane that they almost believe it's a sin to not be in their lane too. And here's what he says. He says, thanks, but I get that. A book can be about certain things and not others. A long book advocating Christian society perhaps would address how societies become and stay Christians. He's like, I get it. I get what you say. Books can be about certain things and not other things. But you would think a book about, creating a Christian nation would at least have some stuff about evangelism and stuff. He doesn't get it. He says he gets it, but I can see that he doesn't. He doesn't understand. That's not what this book is about. This is about political theory. And it is okay for a book to be about that and not about evangelism. It's as simple as that. I'll tell you this. This is so frustrating for your flock. Pastors, please hear me. I'm just a regular pew-sitting Christian, right? Please hear me. Men in your church are frustrated about this because it's like we never grew up from Sunday school. You know what I mean? We never grew up from Jesus is the answer, and you got to preach the gospel. And if I had a penny for how many times I heard preach the gospel to yourself with no application, with no explanation for what that means, I would be, I don't know, I'd probably have $50,000 extra. That's a lot of money. Yes, we do need to hear preach the gospel to yourself, but we need to understand what that means, what that looks like, how I apply that to my day-to-day situations and temptation, when things are going well, when, when I'm in various situations. Like, we need more information. We need more meat. We need a lot more meat, because we understand that we were saved unto good works, and we want to do those good works, and we want to understand those good works. And why is it that every freaking time somebody comes and tries to offer us some meat, you slap the meat into Kingdom Come and offer us a nice glass of pasteurized milk? Can I at least have some raw milk? Every single time, this is what happens. We get offered a nice chunk of meat, and they're just like, no, it's milk time. We need more milk. That's the foundation. It's the milk. We need more milk forever, in perpetuity. I like a good glass of milk from time to time. But we need the meat too, man. We need the meat too. Pastors, please don't be like this. I'm sorry, I'm not picking on you. I just noticed that you are especially susceptible to this. And it's because, in my opinion, I think it's because your area, your lane is of supreme importance. And so you can't understand how anyone would be in another lane, going to the same destination. Look, we're all trying to do good works, right? The destination are the good works that the Lord has prepared beforehand for his people to do. We're all heading in the right direction, but we're in different lanes. This is a multi-lane highway. We're all going to good works on a multi-lane highway, and you're looking at people in the lane next to you going to the same place and saying, why aren't you in my lane? And it's the rhetoric is intense. So it's like you're trying to make people feel like they're sinning or they're ignoring what truly matters when they're not in your lane. Stop trying to get us into your lane. Unless you're trying to groom us to be pastors and elders, co-elders and stuff like that. Like, stop. It doesn't have to be this way, guys. You don't have to throw shade anytime someone's trying to offer a little bit of meat. We don't have to have a gospel presentation in every freaking book if it's not about that. We don't have to have the sinner's prayer in the book when we're talking about political theory. That's a joke. I know you're not talking about the sinner's prayer. I get it. We don't have to rehash the entire Reformed tradition before we can talk about political theory in a book. We can just have a book and say, look, guys, I assume the Reformed tradition. That's why I quote a lot of them, too. I'm assuming all of this. I'm not countering any of it. I believe in the Westminster Confession. And now from that foundation, I'm now going to talk about political theory. That's not a bad thing. That's not a reason for suspicion. It's just an author trying his best to avoid this exact thing. Because I'm sure Stephen knew people would criticize this book by saying, oh, there's no gospel in it. Where's the gospel? So he's like, okay, guys, I'll walk you through this. I'm assuming all of this. All that stuff that you love, you quote, you teach, I assume it all. It's all true. Now let's talk about political theory. I think Stephen, I've said this many times, and I've never actually asked Stephen this, but I've said this many times. Stephen's book is hard to read. And the reason it's hard to read is because he goes into so much detail and so much, nuance and stuff like that, that I feel like what he was trying to do was trying to avoid all of this base level, nonsense that people could, twist his words and things like that. And you don't care about the gospel. He was trying to avoid all that. So he's like, all right, I got to go into this. He didn't have to even say assume the Reformed tradition. He chose to do it. But it didn't matter because people don't care. People don't read the book. You know what I mean? They got to do the reading, guys. You got to do the reading. This is a book about polls. This is just a rehash of Rush Duty. You could honestly, you could read the book. It's a long book, but you could just kind of do a Russian roulette, not Russian roulette. Don't do Russian roulette. You could just do a Christian nationalism roulette and pick any page and read for 10 minutes. Read for 10 minutes. So I don't know. What is that? 10 pages, 20 pages. I don't know. You could do a roulette, pick any page and start reading and know that this is not a rehash of Rushdoony. And I say that as a fan of Rushdoony. I like Rushdoony. This is not that. But people haven't even done that. They haven't even bothered to do the Russian roulette thing with the thing. And you got to do the reading, guys. You got to do the reading. Anyway, pastors, please keep this in mind. I'm saying this because I'm your friend. I'm saying this because I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to tell you the truth. I love you. I love your efforts. I love your work. I love your impact. Don't be like this. This is so frustrating. And people probably don't even tell you that it's frustrating, but it is. And it's especially frustrating when we see other people out there trying to give us some application, trying to give us some meat, and just nothing but shade gets thrown their way. They're not in my lane. What, you can't listen to someone in that lane. We're all going to the same place. We're all trying to do good works. We're all trying to do that. Just let us be. You know what I mean? Let us be. And if you disagree with us, that's okay. You can disagree with us, but disagree with us in the right way, understanding that we don't have to be in your freaking lane because you're in your lane and I'll be in my lane. It's as simple as that. Hope you found this video helpful, pastors. I love you. AD is your friend. God bless.